Good morning, everyone. Actually, it's noon here in Niagara Falls in Canada. Welcome to our 8th session in our Wiser webinar series. Originally, we were planning to meet face-to-face in Berkeley, California in the USA on July 4th and 5th for our 8th International Indigenous Pre-Conference on HIV and AIDS, preceding AIDS 2020, which was scheduled to be delivered in both San Francisco and Oakland in the Bay Area of California, USA. Both conferences, AIDS 2020 and our Indigenous Pre-Conference, were transformed into a virtual experience. We began on July 3rd and 5th with the 8th International Indigenous Pre-Conference for HIV and AIDS, and a two-day event leading into AIDS 2020, which is 5 days long. The Wiser webinar series then continues through the month of July, from July 11th to July 30th. This webinar is being recorded and will be posted online in English, French, and Spanish.
Hilo Rojo es un documental que...
Red Thread is a documentary that we created together with RENPO, National Network of Native People, and we talk about how to educate our partners, our families about HIV in the Indigenous communities. Also, they are carrying out talks with the government ministers, health ministers in Chile, in order to have measures that we can apply to respond to this pandemic. So this is what we try to show in this documentary film. I would like to add something. This is a film that tries to look for empathy with the Indigenous peoples. We want to see them included in the creation of public policies and to make sure that they have access to information, because this is key to respond to the pandemic.
Thank you both, and let's roll it. Let's watch this really interesting film. Do you have questions, Patricio and Matias? When you sent in the idea and you told me about this film, I was like, okay, so what is this Hilo Rojo? What does it mean? So I went to Google Translator and it tells me it means red thread. And I was trying to think, maybe they meant red ribbon, the AIDS ribbon. I don't know. I was trying to figure it out for weeks until you submitted the video and I watched it, and I think I figured it out. And I'm wondering if anybody else in the audience, what is the red thread? What significance does it have to Indigenous HIV?
Okay. Hilo Rojo.
Red thread. The red thread, the concept of red thread, came to be for the connection that it has with the red ribbon. The red ribbon is the symbol of the fight against HIV. It starts there, but it goes to the Indigenous communities. Red, as a color, is present in different things in their lives. So we realized something. We thought that the Indigenous peoples that we met during our filming process, they were selling some handcrafts, and they also sold thread and wool. And when we were there, we met Willie. We went to his store, and he had a lot of red wool. So we thought, okay, that should be it. It clicked. That red ribbon is present in the indigenous culture, and it is a way that helps them support their lives. Also, red represents blood. And HIV for indigenous peoples in Chile is a disease that you get in your blood, right? But the thread is also a metaphor with the placenta. And that is one of the topics that we addressed in the film. In our country, there was a long process for public hospitals to allow indigenous women to receive their placentas after giving birth for their rituals. And that goes beyond the Western worldview. It is different from the indigenous worldview. So at the end, red thread is this constellation of concepts. How did we unify something global as HIV and AIDS with the indigenous culture? So red thread is the unifying process.
In my culture, in my mother's culture, in the Ojibwe culture, we also bury the umbilical cord and the placenta in a sacred place, in our communities. And it really strongly represents that we are connected to our Mother Earth. And we will always be connected to that part of the earth. And that is where my home fire is. And I'm very impressed that the film explains it so well. And when the one lady is talking about, we're not a football club. You can't treat us like a group of people, like a football club or like some school, or indigenous people have a particular worldview in it. And anything that, any intervention or some kind of response to HIV or any other issue in the community needs to use the cultural framework, or it's not going to work, right? Is that what you're saying? That's the kind of messaging I'm getting from the film.
Sí, nosotros opinamos lo mismo. Creemos que...
Yes, we think the same. Indigenous peoples here in Chile, for example, they have a strong connection with the placenta. It is part of the process of having a child. So we believe that that was one of the reasons why we included this in our film. The conflict is that in Chile, the indigenous peoples are located in different regions. In Arica, for example, we have the Aymaras, and the Yagaras are in the south. So in Chile, we have 9 indigenous communities. Each one of them has their own world vision. They have their own connection with nature. So, for example, the campaigns that they have for HIV prevention, it is a struggle. It is a struggle with REMPO, because REMPO tries to have more inclusion. But in order to have more inclusion, they have to also include the different cultures in their campaigns. We see that the power is focused in the city. And most of the people who are indigenous peoples, they live in rural areas. And they have a different perspective on life. And sometimes these are not being taken into account. So, for example, when there is an HIV campaign and they try to reach indigenous communities, they try to include someone who is dressed as an indigenous person, but it's one culture, it's representative of one culture. So they are really not understanding the depth that is required for the messages and the inclusion of the people. We cannot exclude anyone who has HIV, but we need to work together. They are part of the struggle. And this has to be part of the message. We need to think about how to unify, but we also have to respect each community, and we have to learn about each culture, because if you do not have specific messages for specific communities, then maybe we will still have people who do not believe that this disease is real. So we have a long way to go. And the government in Chile should go and learn about everyone's reality, not only about HIV, but other topics as well. We need to educate people. And like that, we will be able to comply with the objectives, the health objectives. These objectives are global for Chile and the rest of the world. So I think that this is part of the debate, because sometimes they feel that they are just a soccer team, because each group has their own community, their own group, but they're not unified. So I think that this is a little bit of what is missing in Chile. We need to connect people. We need to connect people from the cities to the rural areas where indigenous peoples are. At least from what we see here in the Mapuche or Wikiche vision, these are the peoples who live in the south, they are trying to be recognized as a community. For example, when we went there to film the documentary, we met Sonia Guatepilan. She is Huilliche. She lives in the Chiloé island in Chile. And she talked about the Epupillan term. What is this? It means having two souls. And I think that this is what you were referring to, Trevor. It is like having two souls. She never said anything negative about this, for example. She just mentioned how this is seen, how is this perceived, and they have a term for it, which is epopeia.
Cultures talking about the similarities and how they have a similar practice, honoring the placenta and using the umbilical cord as the connection to Mother Earth. So I thank you, Director Matias Soriano and Executive Producer Patricio Quesada, for your most excellent film, Hilo Rojo. Thank you so much.